So you want to know what a snowplow parent is. So I suppose if you were to take the tiger parent's desire for success and mix it in with the helicopter's anxious hovering, you might get a snowplow parent. But to really understand what a snowplow parent is, come take my unofficial and not at all evidence-based snowplow parent test right now. All right, here we go. Imagine you are with your baby and they are at that very wonderful age in which they are sitting up, curious about the world, but have not yet taken their first step. You might remember how proud they look when they figured out sitting up, and they're all chubby and cute and are really starting to show you who they are. For this test though, I want you to imagine the scene. They're surrounded by their toys, those bright colored bricks and whatever toy it is that they love putting in their mouth and chewing on at the time. And in this scenario, you get distracted for a second when you hear your baby whine or protest a little bit. Now, as you look up, you realize that they've dropped their favorite toy to slobber on, and it's fallen just out of their reach. And they're looking at you with that help me expression that melts your heart and pulls you into action. And you've got two choices here. Option A, you go pick the toy up and hand it to them. Duh. Or option B, you ignore them. Okay, that might have been a bit too easy. Let's do it again, but I'll give you a little bit more information this time. In this round, you hear your baby give you another whine or another frustrated noise. It's a little reminder that they really want you to do something. So you can still do option A, which is go pick the toy up and give it to them. Or option B, you can still ignore them because you know if they keep reaching for that toy, one day they're going to get a little bit too frustrated. And when they do that, they're probably going to reach and they're going to topple over onto their belly. And then from that position, one day they will learn how to crawl. And from crawling, you know that one day that will turn into walking. So what I'm really asking is actually quite a complicated question. I'm asking you to decide between A, are you going to give them the toy which might soothe them in the moment, but it would also be depriving them of an experience that is potentially a vital life lesson and a developmental learning moment? Or are you going to choose B, which is asking you to ignore them, knowing that it's going to cause them frustration in the short run and might cause some distress in you actually because you're going to be anxious as you watch them. But it might be a better option for them in the long run. The snowplow parent is the parent who always goes for option A. They won't let insignificant little things like not being able to crawl or walk stand in the way of getting their child whatever their child wants or needs. So just as a snowplow removes snow and ice from the road, the snowplow parent removes obstacles that get in the way of their child's success. Quick reminder, if you want to find your own parenting style, take the free parenting style quiz on mypeoplepatterns.com, and the results will actually show you your top 3 parenting styles. So you might find out that you're 50% snowplow or 25% snowplow parent. If you enter your email address after you get the results, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about the free online parenting course that we just put up online. It's totally free and it's a family systems based parenting course. But let's get back to snowplow parenting. So you might be more familiar with snowplow parents who have made the news in recent years with older children. I think it was in 2019, dozens of actresses, including Loughlin and Felicity Huffman, were in the news because they were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and accused of paying bribes to get their children into very elite universities. And some parents spent up to $500,000 to get this done. Now, both of those two actresses pled guilty and they served time in jail. Those two parents were not going to let insignificant little things like not being smart enough or ambitious enough to get into a college stand in the way of getting their child what their child wanted or needed. So I suppose actually the ultimate test of whether you're a snowplow parent or not is asking yourself if you would do the same thing. If you happen to have won $500,000 on the lottery and there was a way that I could ensure your child got into some Ivy League school or just the school of their choice, would you take that opportunity? Now, what if I could guarantee that there's no way you could ever get caught? Does that change your answer at all? If your answer was immediately yes, then you might want to look to check to see if your desire to help fix or set your child up for success is coming from an anxious, reactive mindset, which would be more like a snowplow parent, or a more calm, thought out and reflective position, which would be more balanced and like a lighthouse parent. And in the My People Patterns world, the lighthouse parent is the ideal parenting type that we're striving for. So if you don't know me, my name is Oliver and I'm a family systems therapist, and I work with parents, adults and families as a therapist, and I'm the clinical director of My People Patterns. The snowplow parent is what we call here a self and other situation. This is a very common people pattern that I see in parents. So I'm going to try and explain what a self and other situation is. We all have an internalized sense of self, which we carry around with us. This gives us our sense of self, our identity. When it comes to our loved ones, we carry an internalized sense of them as well. I call that other. Having a sense of self and a sense of other is very convenient for us as a species and as human beings. It allows us to be in relationship when the other person isn't in front of us. So when you're at the grocery store, you can buy ingredients for a delicious dinner that your partner might like because you can imagine and recall aspects of them in other that make you feel more confident that your delicious spaghetti bolognese dinner will be a hit at dinner. You're recalling aspects of them and maybe even having a conversation with them or fantasizing about what they would like. That's the purpose of other. Now, when you're at work, the other that represents your partner will probably fade into the background because the other that your boss is going to be more prevalent, because it's your boss that is the one that's demanding things of you right there. And hopefully when you leave work, the boss will take up less space and perhaps your partner's other will re-emerge and you can focus on them rather than your boss. Overall, we want self and other to be able to shrink and grow as the situation demands. And if you think about it, you probably don't want your therapist's other of their dog to be at the forefront of their mind when you're paying them to listen to you. You want the other that is you to be at the front. We also want self and other to be separate. When they're not separate, we take on too much responsibility for other people's feelings and experiences. That's what happens in a self and other situation. Most often, the self is a parent who's anxiously thinking and anxiously preoccupied with their child, which is other. Snowplow parents aren't quite able to separate out self and other. So in essence, the snowplow parent doesn't want their child to fail, not only because they love their child, as any parent does, but also a bit selfishly, because if the child fails, then that means part of their self will fail too. Self is not entirely separate from other. This is an entire module of the Fortified Relationships course on My People Patterns, and the introductory level is totally free right now, and I'll put a link somewhere around here so you can check it out. It's a totally free course. You can learn more about self and other situations and many, many other people patterns that we get caught up in and what to do about them. So just to be clear, snowplow parenting isn't restricted to the early years or college admission years. Variations of snowplow parenting happen at any and all stages of a child's life. It could be calling in favors or using your connections to get children into that certain summer camp that they have to go to this year, or calling the coach of the team to see if they can convince them to let their child join. Micromanaging or hovering over results is very similar to a helicopter parent, and there's definitely some similarities between the two types of parents. Both remain close to their child, monitoring and managing and swooping in when needed. Other examples of this that I've come across in my clinical career is things like parents writing notes on behalf of their children to excuse them from taking a test or missing a homework assignment that the child just hasn't done. Another example that I remember is a parent going head-to-head with the teacher because the parent didn't agree with the teacher's grade. Most of the examples I can think of are to do with academic success, and that's the part of a snowplow parent that's very similar to a tiger parent. Intensive or tiger parents value education above all else and believe at their core that their child will have the best possible life if they apply themselves fully to achievement in the world of academics or sport. Snowplow parents believe the same thing, it's just they don't mind cutting corners or using some of their privilege or authority to give the illusion of success rather than actually making their child successful, smart, intelligent with a strong work ethic. All of these parent names that you see online are metaphors, and I think it's always important to break down what the metaphor means. So the snowplow metaphor comes from the snowplow, which clears roads of snow and ice, making it easier for cars to travel. But I'm not so sure that removing obstacles in your child's path is going to make life easier for them in the long run. Real life snowplows weigh 4 times more than the average car, and a collision with one can be deadly. And I think that's a warning to anyone who tries to get in the way of a snowplow parent on a mission to help their child. They will mow you down. If you live in a cold part of the world where snowplows operate, you probably know that you should never pass a snowplow on the road. They have too many blind spots and don't maneuver easily or stop quickly enough. And in the same way, as we're about to see, snowplow parents have pretty big blind spots in this approach. And these blind spots are often tied into the long-term success of their child. So in all of the videos of the different parenting types that I've done, I try and map out where the particular parenting style we're talking about fits in the 4 dials of parenting. These 4 dials of parenting come from the research of Diana Baumrind and Earl Schaefer, who were the legends of parenting psychology. Their work gave us the parenting quadrant, which we've all probably seen and that every therapist learns in grad school. But the problem that I have with it is that it only gives you 4 different options. It doesn't really show you where the snowplow parent fits. I found it easier to break down the original research of Schaefer and Baumrind into the components that went into creating these 2 axes. And when you do that, every single parenting style that you can think of can be visualized as having a different setting on each of the 4 dials. And there's an infinite number of combinations now that will accommodate every parenting style that can be possibly thought of, and perhaps even every family's parenting style. There's another video on this, but here's a quick breakdown of what the 4 dials mean. The scale of warmth is a scale that reflects the warm, yummy, loving feelings that we would want our parents to be giving us as we grow up. The acceptance scale is about how accepting or rejecting our parents are of us. And we obviously want our parents to be accepting of who we are, what we're interested in, as well as the feelings that we have in any given moment. Control of behaviors refers to the idea that our parents need to help us control and manage our behaviors when we're younger, because we don't know what behaviors are socially acceptable in the world and in our family. And we also don't know what behaviors are dangerous or unhealthy. Control of authority refers to the capacity a parent has to let their child be a unique individual versus forcing them to fit into a specific vision or an idea that the parent has of what they want their child to be. We all want our parents to give us the freedom to explore who we are and what we love and what we want to be versus being told who we have to be. When I think of the snowplow parent, the dials that stand out for me are acceptance and autonomy. I'm not entirely convinced that a snowplow parent fully accepts their child as they are. If they're bribing college admissions staff to get their child into a school, they're not really accepting that their child might not be smart enough or might not have the work ethic enough to legitimately get into that school. So I'm setting that dial quite high. In a similar way, I'm not sure if rushing to fix things when they go wrong for the child is giving the child much autonomy. The parent is not giving that child the freedom to be themselves, to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes and grow from them. So when you put aside the morally ambiguous nature of pulling strings on behalf of your kid, there's a more significant issue that the snowplow parent often doesn't consider, and it's to do with failure and natural consequences. All parents want what is best for their children, and if you were to assume that getting into an Ivy League school was best for your child, I can see how it would make sense that you might do anything to make that a possibility. But I have a philosophy, however, that one of my mentors instilled in me about therapeutic work with clients that sort of applies to parents and children. The idea is that if you are to give something to a client, you might also be depriving them of something. So if I were to guess and assume what my client is feeling, I'm taking away the opportunity that my client has to go inside, identify, and then articulate what they're feeling, which is actually what some of my clients are coming to therapy to learn to experience and do for the first time. I'm always cautious in my work not to immediately answer questions or make assumptions or give something that might make it faster or easier. Because there might be a cost of that, and I'm more concerned with my client's growth rather than the quick fix. So if you were one of the parents who instinctively gave toys to that baby in the first example, there would be some instant gratification in pleasing the baby, perhaps seeing them smile or getting a positive reaction from them. And you might also be taking the opportunity for that baby to learn something about frustration, balance, and ultimately that developmental milestone of crawling. Now, obviously, there's a million different opportunities and a million different ways that a baby learns to crawl. And this is just a hypothetical situation to tell a point. And doing that once or twice, even 3 or 4 times, is not going to make much difference to your child. It's more about the idea of how quickly you rush in to give, fix, or soothe that child without thinking about the consequences and what the child might lose if you were to give them the easy fix. And in the same way, if you were to buy your child's way into an Ivy League school, it sounds to me as if it would be a quick fix that would be giving the child what they wanted. In the short run, some gratification about that acceptance letter or perhaps the way their resume looks. But in the long run, I think this might impact the teenager's self-esteem. They really didn't work as hard as everyone else. And what about the natural consequences and learning experience that you get from failing? No one ever on the planet has gone through life without failing at something. And failure gives you the motivation to grow. It gives you resilience. The baby failing to get the toy the first time might mean that the baby gets more frustrated and reaches, and that turns into a crawl. Or failing to get into a school you might want to really get into might mean that you learn that you do actually have to study and work hard to get to where you want to go. That's a work ethic that is going to be with you for the rest of your life. In the act of giving to their child or making things easier for their child, the snowplow parent is actually taking away and depriving their child of various other opportunities. And that is a big source of concern for therapists and developmental psychologists. Parenting brings up so much anxiety, and I think that's not talked about enough in these parenting styles. All of us have to manage anxiety in some way, shape, or form, and these parenting styles are more about how you manage the anxiety. To me, it seems that snowplow parenting is a way of acting out on parental anxiety. Instead of soothing it or acknowledging it and working with it, you're going to do something to get rid of the anxiety. We have to be very conscious as parents of what is motivating our actions. Is it our own anxiety, or is it legitimately in our child's best interest? And I don't think some of these decisions can be made quickly. You really do have to slow down, which is very, very hard, and think about what the impact of our actions are in the short term and the long run. All right, so if you enjoyed this, please hit subscribe, like, follow, share, and let me know if you have parenting questions or want me to talk about another parenting style. I'll be happy to do that for you.